yes, you're going to have mechanisms of what we do for the people we bring into our organizations, but what are we doing to create that AI sort of literacy, that ability from a cognitive development perspective, from a language perspective, from a business frame of reference? What are we doing to influence what this pipeline needs to look like? And I worry tremendously about everybody else. You know what I'm saying? It's so hard, as we know, inside our own doors as it is, but I don't think there's enough urgency that's going into what does fit for purpose of a pipeline actually look like. And I think that's why I talk about the collective intelligence. It's no individual party. It's about coming together to really dialogue, to really come together and to really codify what this thing needs to now look like.
So also another interesting thing is that the future of this country's employment problem is not corporate. It's small to medium-sized businesses who doesn't have capital or funding to have an ICAS or somebody from outside to come and do their human stuff. My experience, Karin, and you must maybe just speak into that, because I think our listeners need to ask that, is if I do employ some of these younger people and we want to try and grow them, my experience has been, I'm not a psychologist, but I do know how to try and intentionally sit and just listen. Just make sure that I've got the discipline to once a month or sit with each employee and just have a conversation and listen. Do you think that's lacking when your patients come to you in this world? Because each company can't employ a team of psychologists. How can we as the business people solve for that, or at least support those people?
Yesterday I actually spoke to somebody who's a practitioner, and she's been away from like a community of other practitioners. She's been working from home, seeing patients here and there for the last 6 years. And she said sometimes she just really needs walking down the corridor and saying hi to somebody, or just thinking, oh, you walk there and somebody says, you look nice today. And I think that links to what you said earlier with the Valentine's Day example, is I think we really underestimate the power of knowing someone cares, So you come to therapy with your words like, nobody cares about me, nobody knows what I'm dealing with, this is so hard, I feel so alone, is something I hear almost every session. And I think you don't need a psychologist in a business for people to not feel alone or not feel seen. But you have to cultivate a culture that we care about each other. We're not trampling on each other to get somewhere. We're not all irritated because I have to take up the work of somebody who didn't do their work. But if you can build a team, like you said earlier, then you might eradicate half the need for a therapist. Although therapists are still important. There is a place.
Definitely, what I see it is, and what I've seen is, I think we need to drive this ability to seek to understand. And seeking to understand in South Africa, we have got so much beautiful cultural diversity. We're not called the Rainbow Nation for nothing. But when you start to look at the very, enormous poverty that we see here, seeking to understand, and one of the things that I've done practically over the years is I call it the blockage to the learning. Going back to, what would it take for this person to thrive? So we all got in a car and we were fortunate enough to drive here. But what if I had to take 3 taxis to get here? What if, and I've had situations where somebody lives in the Vaal Triangle, it takes him 3 hours. So their day starts at 3 a.m. And then we give them a what for because you're 3 minutes late. So I think there's understanding this blockage. I live in this particular area. This is how I get to work. This is how I get home. This is the impact of no water. This is the impact of no electricity. These are the circumstances that can block me from being optimal. And I think we have to be a little more heightened in terms of understanding people's circumstances, understanding their context, understanding their cultures, and all of those things, so that we can create this ability and this environment for thriving, the psychological safety, this ability to connect, this ability to be seen, see me through my eyes, kind of thing. And so I really think that's something we can work on, is seek to understand. Do we really understand each other?
Actually care.
Yeah.
Christiaan, what do you do in your business to
Well, I think
care?
again, maybe I come back to the thing I said earlier. Now, it's amazing what can happen if you pretend everybody that works for you is a real person, right? Just like you, because some of the stuff that she just touched on earlier, like what's fundamental to people is having a sense of purpose. I get up every day. There's stuff I have to do. There's people that rely on me. You probably see a lot of people who've lost a sense of purpose, and then they think, all I do is I just go through the currents of life and nobody will miss me when I'm gone type of thing, which obviously is very misplaced, but being intentional of creating purpose for people. And I recently listened to something that's really resonated with me where the interview was saying, pessimism is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because if you, and in a country like South Africa, the problems abound. So if you try and understand and listen to every single problem there, you'll be completely overwhelmed. And you might think they are so abundant that we're never gonna change anything. But the reason pessimism is a self-fulfilling prophecy is because if you think there's nothing you can do, you do nothing, and then nothing changes, and then you say, you see, nothing happened. Whereas if you think, okay, I have this sphere of influence every day where I am, I have this group of people I can work with. If I can make this thing or that thing better, or understand the situation, like you mentioned on the transport or whatever the situation, if I can just identify 2 or 3 things I can make an impact on, let me do that. And it's amazing what happens if you focus on that and you try and work with everybody that can do that in your sphere of influence, what actually happens. Because that's really I think the stories that inspire people.
And people forget, like we live in a culture where there's a problem, so I have to solve it, then it's better. I'm assuming very much so in the tech world. So we have this idea that if I suffer, I have to solve my problem, and then life's going to be easy, and I won't suffer anymore, which is not true. Pain and suffering is a part of our lives. But if you look at the work of Viktor Frankl, who says you can deal with suffering if you have meaning.
Yes.
Right? So then having things that create meaning in my life doesn't make it pain-free, but it enables me to almost tolerate the pain that's going to come with life.
You as a why can endure almost any hell.
Exactly that, yes.
I just want to quickly go back to, because I think, again, I want to make sure we try and get as low in this principle as possible. Let's speak to the actual individual who's out there who's thinking, I want to get into the tech scene because I see they're either making lots of money or whatever the case might be, even if that's still true. What do they do? Where do they go? Do they go and study? Do they not go and study? Do they go do short courses? How do you prepare yourself for an email to me? And I open an email. I got one last week actually, and the guys had a bunch of attachments, certifications, a resume. There was a degree, but I almost didn't spend time on it because what I was looking at is how he was writing the email. What I was trying to figure out, was it him or ChatGPT who wrote this email? That's what I'm currently looking at. What do these people need to do?
I think the most important thing, and it's not just the individuals, it includes each and every one of us that's listening and sitting around this table. We have got to find a new relationship with learning. And we come from an education system that said, learn this, test you on that, and you got 80%. We said, you're going to be brilliant at that. Whereas you come into the world of work and it's a completely new system. It's a new system. Any new person, youngster coming into the world of work, it takes him 6 months just to be a little bit comfortable with this new system. Forget about teaching them the job and all of those kind of things. So for me, that ability to become a lifelong learner, that curiosity, that I'm looking, I'm seeking, I'm watching YouTube. You don't need to have, money. Actually, education in South Africa is solved by connectivity and a device, the rest is out there for people to access. But we have got to be able to teach everybody to have a new relationship with how you learn. And learning is not the norm that we have all been accustomed to. It's a completely new world. So literally, a degree or, a qualification, really, like I mentioned, not that it's not important, of course not. But by the time you come into the workplace, what you've been learning is really not very relevant here. But what we do love is the fact that you've got a little bit more life skills, you've got a little bit more emotional intelligence, you've got a little bit more savvy. And that's what we're sort of honing on, and say, okay, come into the workplace. We're going to start with a blank piece of paper anyway. And yes, maybe I'll put you into that space or into that function, even though I can take a finance person and put them into HR. But, I think new love of learning, a new way to be curious, a new way to problem solve, to all of those things, those people are going to be far more successful. And we're going to see a lot more of looking at the skills that, without work experience, did you start the choir? Did you, what did you do that required you to do different? That's going to talk to me about you've created certain habits or the ability to navigate this space in a particular way. So I think the guardrails or the rules that we've been looking at are starting to shift. We've been using, this piece of paper as a sifting mechanism, but love of learning and micro credentials on top of your qualifications is actually what's needed today.
Yeah, look, I would echo that. I mean, ultimately, up until this point, before you could write code so fast with AI, when you're hiring programmers, all you ask is, show me what you've written. Now it's a bit more difficult, and we're still figuring out in the interview process now, do we get them in a day and they do it the old-fashioned way, I guess is what it's going to be called. But I think to your point as well, do people have a proactiveness or a hunger about them and so on? And because acquiring talent's one of the most interesting problems to solve, because how much can you know about a person in 45 minutes? And if you're interviewing people who by temperament would be introverts, you got to figure out what are they not saying. You're trying to spot the unpolished diamonds. Where are they? And that I think that will always be, like, certain things will remain universal, like where are the unpolished diamonds and how do I find them? South Africa is this dichotomy of high unemployment but high skill shortage. People are trying to find talent, but yet there's a lot of people around. And how do we develop that? But I think ultimately we must all see ourselves as educators and teachers, and teach and educate with what you have to work with in the sphere of influence that you have. And it's not just the people who work for you in the workplace. It's everybody you interact with every day, young people, old people, whatever. Like where you are, try and fulfill that, I think.
And I appreciate that. And I read the other day that before the news spread around the world really quickly, if you lived in Rights in the Free State in the 1940s or wherever else, you didn't know about all the world problems. You only knew about your neighbor's problem, that problem, so it looked solvable. Because exactly like you said earlier, if I see all these problems, especially it's all available on my phone, America's problems, South Africa's problems, it just looks like it's too many problems to solve, and you don't even know where to start to solve your own problems. One of the problems I've seen is, especially with our labor laws, complexity, and so on, and it's maybe something we can start landing the plane on, from your world and from your world and from my world. Which parts of your system business do you employ? Do you take that risk to employ? Which parts of it do you outsource? You rather pay a premium but not take the complexity or the soft stuff that comes with it. How do you manage that?
I think with difficulty, because everything is governed by the labor laws. I mean, in our world, we're multinational. If I look at the laws in France and I look at the laws in South Africa and the laws in America. Very different, circumstances that happen when it comes to labor. I think, going back to my comment around collective intelligence is that part of the conversations we need to have around collective intelligence, especially when you look at who's employing people and the policies that govern how and what we do with employed people, is I'm not the authority on this, and it's I'm just thinking aloud or trying a solution. But how do the labor laws become conducive to this fluidity that we find ourselves in? And contingent workers and your full-time employees or your outsourcing or your how is it possible to get all of this working together without you being chained by labor laws that actually don't allow you to be creative and explore when it comes to trying, or is it not better to give somebody a job for a month than sort of, because I can't take you on employee or full-time, or I don't know. These are the kind of questions that we do need to ask ourselves. And as much as obviously labor law is important, it goes without saying, but is there the opportunity around this collective intelligence for us to think about this new world that we're in? Is there things that we can now influence to make this a little bit more conducive to employability?
How does it work in your world? Because
I think it's like what she said, it is with difficulty. I mean, I think most things in business is not, as people always portray it, as people come up with a perfect strategy, they execute it, and then it works. It's, you have a high level goal of objectives of what you work towards, and in the process of pursuing that, it's a creative aspect, and you navigate the fluidity of what you work with and the environment that you're in, and that changes all the time. So I guess it's navigating those things. But if we track it back, fundamentally, like if we take what are we doing as businesses every day, we are trying to deliver meaningful goods and services to customers that solve a problem for them that they are willing to pay for. That's the underlying principle. And in the world that we're moving into, how we do that, it will most certainly change, but that's the why we do it. And if we don't do that well, we will stop existing as a business, and that's the dynamic that we have. So the way I try and think about it is, what am I doing for what are we and I and my team doing for our customers, and are we doing it better or different or whatever? Like if you take the evolution of where we are now, historically, that you can open a web page, you type in something you want to know about, and you wait 10 seconds, then you get a Google page and you read it. Then it becomes like, if I don't get the response within 0.1 seconds, I'm using something else because this is too slow. Now people are going to an LLM where they get a much richer answer, but they're waiting a few seconds to get it and they're okay with it. So I think just that kind of thing, to understand expectations change the whole time. And what you're trying to do, as she says, with difficulty, is navigating that with the people you have, the environment you work in, the legislation framework you need to deal with. But I think ultimately it's answering the question: how do I do the best for my customers? How do I do right by my people? How do I drive ongoing success for the organization and the capacity I'm involved in?
your metron of influence. Like, I want to suggest exactly like you say, when people go back to work, is that just worry about what is in your circle of influence. Just solve for there. Don't stop looking on the phone and everything around that, because it seems to me like people are just disabled by this, because there's problems to solve, and there's creative ways of solving them, even between all the legislation and so on. It is solvable, but it's unsolvable if you've got the whole world's problems in your mind.
I think a good way to also maybe just hold it is, we've talking, there's so many angles to this, but I think also if you put dignity, human dignity, as central to everything that we do, and hold that in its place, I think a lot of things will find its way easily. But when we take the human dignity out of the equation, irrespective of what that equation is trying to solve, we find ourselves wanting, So I think You know, you made me just think about that with the labor law. Why is the laws there? It's because we're not protecting the dignity of people. So if we can bring dignity into this artificial intelligence space and world and use that as the central theme to solving, I think we'll find ourselves in a better place.
Yeah, I think I would just say, like, one of the most transformative things to do is to change the life of somebody else. And we can all reflect back on those moments in our own life where a great teacher or a great mentor or a great boss gave us these moments of epiphanies that really transformed the way that we look at life, the world, how we conduct ourselves, and how that translated into our own personal lives. But doing that every day for other people, I don't think there's any other more rewarding thing that you can do. And this country is full of people doing it everywhere we can look as we speak.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. I think we can land it there. Your wisdom definitely did come through, and we really appreciate your time. And we'll take it further from there.